In a world where information is always at our fingertips, we've moved past the challenge of finding facts to the much harder task of sifting through the noise. We are constantly bombarded by algorithms designed to trigger our emotions and feed our biases, often turning our mental health into someone else's currency.
It's just that the amount of information that is at our fingertips and how easy it is. Anyone can put information out there. Like it used to be that you had to be a vetted source to be able to
Right.
get something published. Now, anyone can publish anything.
Yeah, that's why when anyone comes at me with, well, I read on Wikipedia, I'm like, technically Wikipedia is like group source, so I'm gonna need a more valid source than Wikipedia. No shade to Wikipedia.
Today, Chris and Jen explore the vital skill of how to think about what to think. Are you seeking to support your existing thoughts, or are you brave enough to be objectively curious? It's time to reclaim your agency in the digital age. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Chris and Jen in the Morning.
Where self-care meets real life.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Jen.
Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode where we're going to talk about the readiness of information at our fingertips these days.
We're going to talk about how to think about what to think.
Yes. The what, why, when, how, who. Mhm. Yes.
Who
yes.
or whom?
I don't know. We were talking earlier about how the English language is very complicated.
It's very complicated. But, in all seriousness, we've talked a little bit in the past about how information is so readily available these days. And that's something that, in our lifetimes, Chris, didn't always used to be the case.
Yeah.
And now the skill isn't so much about going and finding the information. It's about how to sift through all of the information and figure out what's what. And so we wanted to talk about that today and how that applies to our mental health and our health as a community and the role that we play in that.
Yeah. And each of us play a part. So speaking of community, we are building a community here. And so if you are interested in being part of this community, contributing through emailing us or, adding comments, following, subscribe. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, please like, share, comment, come be part of the conversation. We, Jen and I started this platform because we felt like we were talking about things that not only impacted us, but the people who were around us as well. And we found we were pulling it into our real lives. So we're hoping that we're building a community here that can hopefully do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So before we get into our research topic, let's talk about gratitude. And Chris, do you want to kick us off?
I am happy to. And before I jump into gratitude, I am coming off of a head cold, so I may sound a little nasally today. Sorry
you
about that.
sound great.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so what I am grateful for this week is I had the opportunity to go see. So my office moved locations, number one. And number two, I had a friend who got us tickets to go see a show, and we met up with them for dinner before we went to the show. And so I was kind of navigating my way through a part of the city that's new and a little unfamiliar to me. And I just it kind of brought back the newness of having moved to the city. And I just was walking past restaurants I had never seen before or heard about. And I'm like, oh, I want to go check out this one. Oh, what's happening here? It just reminded me so much about how magical the city is and how grateful I am to live here and have this opportunity to really engage with a level of culture that I don't think a lot of people have access to just based on what's available to people. So it just I've been here for at this point 10 plus years, and I'm so happy to continue to have the opportunity to live here and get to go do things and see things and experience the city in new and different ways that kind of revive my excitement about living here.
I love the city. It's just such a magical place. I love it.
Well, and now the next time that you come visit, I have new places to show you and new places to take you.
I mean, that's part of what I love about it is that no matter
Yeah,
how many times you go or how long you've lived there, there's always something new.
exactly.
Although, you could say that about most
That's
places
true.
we've found, but well, I love that, a gratitude moment, and I love the city. It's such an amazing place. This week, I really have been thinking about how grateful I am for all of the creative people that make a career and invest, big amounts of time in their lives to creating art for all of us. And I was thinking about that as Ace and I have been reading through this book series. Really, he's been reading to me, which I love and I am very grateful for. But we're reading this like fantasy fiction book series. I think it's like written for middle school aged, which is like, I don't know, some of my favorite stuff to, to listen to. But it's called Mark of the Fool. And it's just really nice to like be able to step out of life and listen to this story that's so beautifully written and like so thoughtfully put together that weaves in like not only this great storytelling but also these like this undercurrent of mental health, really, to be honest. Like the main character um does a lot of like positive affirmations and talks about like when I'm stuck in a problem, think and adapt, find your way around it. There's a like part of the like art of like managing through their situation is meditation and learning to, avoid distraction. And so here we are reading this fun book, but then there's also this like little subtext of mental health reminder through it.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a nice fun, you know kind of retreat from all the things that you have going on. So
Yeah.
I'm just incredibly grateful that there are people that have this gift of building these stories so thoughtfully and putting that out there for the world. So super fun. And if you're looking for a good like fantasy fiction book to read, book series to read, Mark of the Fool is a good one. I would recommend it.
We do enjoy Goodreads. Not the website, but we appreciate that too. But like things that we should be reading. So if you have recommendations, please share. I
Yeah.
agree. I think I have gotten more into reading in the past like year and a half, and I will say like to see how different people's styles are and how they bring things to life is so um amazing, and it can be so different, right? Like
Yeah.
depending on what you're reading and who the author is and even the genre that you're in. So
I also
I
really
agree there.
appreciate that Ace reads it to me. I mean, listening to Ace read is like magic. So I'm
We'll have to record him reading some stuff
yeah,
and
I'm
put it out
totally
there.
trying to convince him to do this. So um it's amazing. But
Well, I think the idea around like mental health and like the things that are happening around us like totally relevant for today's conversation, because
yeah.
this was I kind of had this idea based on our conversation last week where I was talking a little bit about how like sometimes how I guard myself and set myself up for success is trying to be mindful of the social media stuff that I
Yeah.
like take in. And um I was thinking about that more after we had recorded, and like why do I do that stuff? Like why am I and it's stuff that like I get triggered easily, and I think I shared directly about like anything really LGBTQ plus related like really just seems to get me heated up real quick, like. But it really got me
Yeah.
thinking about this idea around, well, how do we stay informed? Where do we get our information? How do we process it, but like also how are we like pulling that stuff into our real lives, the conversations that we're having. They're not to make anything political, but like there's a lot of politics things that are happening, and
Yeah.
so how do we know what's real versus like what's a inflamed story, trying to just get us to act out of emotion versus like from a uh like more cognitive space, I guess. um And so like that's kind of where this idea was birthed out of. Like how are we staying informed while also trying to manage the things that, may be around us that are triggering us, or, it could be noise.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you bring forward, because when we think about where we receive a lot of information today, a lot of it does come from sources that are based on like an algorithm that is fed by amount of engagement and
Yeah.
views. And so, like, that's not necessarily a new concept, because when you think about like news shows and being concerned about ratings and things like that, like that's been around for forever.
Yeah.
But and so, that balance of like what news is being sensationalized in order to get more views and, ratings and things like that. But I think it's just really taken off, escalated at
Yeah.
a rapid pace with the internet, and whether it's search algorithms or a lot of social media, different sites and algorithms, what's rewarded is views and engagement. And in
Yeah.
order to get views and engagement, you have to make people stop and draw them in. And a lot of times, like, just the facts isn't the way to do that. It's something sensational, some sort of sensational headline, which again is not a new concept,
No.
just something that it feels like the sources where we receive a lot of information have doubled down on. And so I think keeping that in mind, it doesn't mean that, like, just we all know that everything you read on the internet isn't true, but we also all know that everything you read on the internet isn't untrue. So
Yeah.
I think
Well,
it's keeping in mind that there are ulterior motives for the way that things are written, which has always been the case. But just because it's being pushed at you doesn't mean that immediately that information is, without like some kind of bias or, um, so I think that's interesting.
yeah, I read a statistic recently from Pew Research Center that talked about how like 53% of adults in the US actually get some sort of their news coverage from social media, which,
Oh, I would say that number is too low.
well, and I guess it depends on like where you're going for like your first source of information. Like I don't know the exacts around like the how the questions were asked and things
Yeah.
like that, but I do think like there's a level of um like because I will see things on like my social, and that may drive me to go to a different platform to go look
Look it
for
up.
additional
Yeah.
information,
Yeah.
versus like take that as my one and only source. But it's
But it still sticks in the back of your mind,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
Like, it informs this kind of subconscious perspective, sometimes that we don't even intentionally realize. And
Right.
as I was thinking about this, I was thinking a lot about, like, remember when we used to go to the library and there was like this Dewey Decimal System, and like a card with dots on it or
Yeah.
something. And the encyclopedia, we've talked about that in the past. And
Yeah.
like, I didn't vet what went into the encyclopedia. Um, when you went to the librarian and you asked for a book to help you get research on something, you didn't necessarily like do this heavy level of vetting. Now, maybe we should have. And so I think this brings, some things to the forefront, like all of these discussions about history curriculum and, how that's put together, and rewriting history
Yeah.
curriculum. And then I have to think about, well, gosh, what was I taught and how did that get there? And, we've talked a little bit about science curriculum in the past. And
Yeah.
like, maybe we should have been questioning some of these things before. So, um, but now we live in this world where there's just information that is everywhere, but, you don't really always know what the ulterior motives are behind that.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like there's just so much information. The talent that we need now is figuring out how to like sift through it and vet the information. But it's like you can't go super deep on every single piece of information you
Yeah.
get because it's just impossible.
Yeah. It's overwhelming. Like, and it's coming based on, I think what's super interesting is a lot of like how we search for data and information as well, like is going to serve up what is given to us.
Yeah. It kind of
Which
feeds the story that you already have because that
exactly.
drives engagement.
Right. Exactly. So like we don't really know. And I think that's where like, that's where our brain and information really comes into this picture. Because I remember I was having uh, a lively discussion, likely with either Frank or one of my friends, and I remember like we had different positions on whatever we were arguing about. It was probably nothing super significant, but um, whenever I went to go look up like data points to make my argument, the way that I wrote the question was only going to serve up things that were going to help me with my argument, not challenge me in my argument.
Yeah. I mean, and isn't that like so natural, right? That's
Right.
our brains are wired to do that. Because we're looking to support our position.
Right.
Yeah, it's confirmation bias. And I think there's like this when you get into this like even if it's friendly, sort of opposing or combative, like I'm on one side, you're on the other, you just double down into that like in group, out group sort of
Right.
thinking. And then you go into this like mode, your brain starts going into this mode of how do I support my position?
Yeah.
Um, because being wrong is like a threat. So it's really interesting. Um, I think it's important to remember it's not just about like, it's not black and white in telling like what is the truth versus what is a lie. There's a lot of gray. It's like, what is distraction? So, like if you in political, research, for instance, or like political campaigning, it's really typical to see when we talk about issues, responses be like a distraction from the actual issue, and we take the bait all the time. And so, like the responses that we're getting back, are they pulling our focus away from what the real issue is and
Yeah.
towards like a polarized view? What's perception? So it, sometimes I'm not saying there is no such thing as real hard truth, but like sometimes multiple things can be true. And so what is biased based on the perception of the person putting it out there, because we all walk in different shoes.
Yeah. That's very true.
And then what's just a flat out lie because you know that also exists out there. I think those are the easier ones to seek out.
Yeah.
But the like distraction is sometimes hard not to take the bait and like go down the path of distraction and go, yeah, well,
Right.
this is the really important issue here when it's not. And then what's
Or is it even an issue at
perception?
all?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's sometimes like,
We
oh yeah,
make
I
an
care a
issue out
lot
of something
about
that's
that. How
not.
could they say something like that? And then you go and you look into it and it's like, actually, they didn't say that. Like, they've twisted words, they've
Yeah.
like cut things in a certain way, which, but it's distraction because now you're no longer going and like seeking information that either is like helping or creating the case in another way. It's going to either affirm or uh argue that counterpoint. So it's just so interesting. I hadn't really
Yeah.
thought of it that way.
Well, and when you think about all of these like social media channels that are monetized, so there are accounts making money off of views and engagement. We understand negativity bias exists, and they're really counting on that. So we're wired to pay more attention to alarming information. We know that. I mean, back from the days of the newspaper and headlines, and you read the
Right.
headline, and so you pick up the paper
So it
and then you
pulls you
read
in.
the story and you're like, okay, well, that was a bit of a hook. um, and so but when identity or values feel threatened, we go into defense mode.
Yeah.
Now I think understanding that like sometimes that can be used for good, right? It's a way to get attention. But when that's what we're constantly doing all the time or constantly having put in front of us all the time, because that's what's feeding the algorithm, is really about making money. I think like you have to realize w- if you don't sort of protect yourself from that, you become a pawn in somebody else's money-making game.
Yeah.
Like really, truly.
Yeah.
Your emotional response is their currency. And that's not always healthy for us, because then you get this like burnout feeling
Right.
from like just all the noise, and feeling like spikes in your adrenaline going up
Right.
and down, and you get a little more edgy. And we've talked about like I scroll until something triggers me and then I leave, but that means that if you're doing that multiple times a day, you're getting triggered multiple times a day.
Right. Well, and you're going on that roller coaster, and it's exhausting. Like it can be
Yeah.
mentally and physically sometimes draining. Like if you're going through those that emotional piece as well. I think that's why it's really important that we are aware of where we're getting our information from,
Yeah.
because sometimes what's being served up to us, and I don't just mean in like social media
Yeah.
platforms, like we both use social media
It's the news,
personally, right? It's the news,
it's your
it's
internet search results,
exactly, it's all the cookies that are left on your computers, like
it's the curriculum in the textbooks, it's I mean, like really it's everywhere. And I don't think this is a new problem. It's just that the amount of information that is at our fingertips and how easy it is. Anyone can put information out there. Like it used to be that you had to be a vetted like source to be able to
right.
get something published. Now, like anyone can publish anything.
Yeah, that's why when anyone comes at me with, well, I read on Wikipedia, I'm like, technically Wikipedia is like group source, so I'm gonna need a more
Yeah.
valid source than Wikipedia.
Yeah. And I mean,
No shade to
it
Wikipedia.
doesn't mean that, I mean, I think that it's healthy to an extent that there's not somebody throttling who can provide information, because you see, like if people are throttling who and vetting who gets to be the source of truth, then they're the ones controlling the source of truth. So
Right.
I think there can be some value in that, like crowdsourcing information, but also we have to just put that into perspective. And I think it's easy for us to take these these ideas about information that we grew up with, where it was
Yeah.
more like to be trusted, and realize there's less vetting going on here. So
Well, I do think like the interesting thing in more um modern history is this idea around influencers, because
Mhm.
like you used to have ambassadors, right, who would help like make a brand be known, and be the ones who wear the logos and things like that. But I feel like in this influencer world that we now live in, it's people who are like engaging with the product and kind of sharing their experience, or product
Mhm.
or experience with whatever it may be. um and I think that's meant to make it more relatable to the everyday people of the, because we're not all NFL athletes or
Yeah.
Olympic athletes, like,
What, we're
so
not?
I know it's shocking, it's
Shocking.
absolutely shocking.
Shocking.
But I think this influencer lifestyle has also brought in some of that, like,
Yeah.
it's also, some of them go beyond just like talking about what something brings to them. Like they're also sharing their perspectives on life, which, like you said, like if no one is technically, I think you used the word throttling, like the what the truth is, which is fine. Like I don't, I think we all have the right to free speech. I'm
Yeah.
a true proponent of that. But I think it's also sometimes misinformation gets spread because you understand a part of it, or it's only how it has impacted you, and you're not thinking in that greater scale.
Yeah, I mean, even when you really, that's exactly right. Even when you really believe in what you're saying, you may not have all of the puzzle pieces. So there
Yeah.
are things that you may not know, that then come to light later, and you go, oh, in hindsight, maybe I wouldn't have repped that. Or, and I think that's true anywhere of anything. But I think it just so I was having this conversation with a family member earlier this week, and they were kind of like talking about some of the things that I do from a self-care standpoint, and sort of playing devil's advocate and picking apart at them and saying that's not like really valid. And it was more like Western medicine is the gold standard, and things like therapeutic massage and chiropractic and all of this stuff, like it's not real. And it was like this whole conversation. And um at the end of it, they just said, well, you raised me to be okay, so now we know who it is. But yeah, I was raised to question, things. And I said, you're right. You were, and I think that's a really good thing, and I don't want you to lose that.
Yeah.
Um, but also, like, as you grow up, maybe you'll have a different perspective on
No,
these
but
things.
I think that's exactly, like, we've talked about this in other episodes, right? Like, just because you are seeking information to better understand a different
Yeah.
perspective, or you are wanting to engage in a conversation with someone who has a counterpoint than you, that doesn't mean that you're like giving up your beliefs or giving up anything that you personally hold true. Like, it's okay to engage in conversations with people who don't think like you.
Yeah.
And it's probably beneficial for both people involved, if you're open to it, to hear the two differing perspectives.
Yeah, it's totally true. Okay, so now that we know this, what do we do about it? Well,
Yeah.
first, awareness is key. And so we're just going to be that like broken record and say it again. Awareness is key. And I think that's a lot of the reason why we dive into the topics that we do, because, um, it's first just about creating awareness, and then you can tailor your journey for what works for you and how you go about handling it. But
Yeah.
first, be aware of it. And so I think the first thing is just like, let's be real with ourselves. We're not as objective as we think we are.
What?
I know. It's shocking. But like, the thing I think we have to ask ourselves constantly is, am I seeking to support my thoughts, or am I being objectively curious?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, I think if we're honest with ourselves, we would say, nope, I'm getting hooked here. I'm seeking to support my thoughts,
Yeah.
versus I'm really trying to be curious. And frustration is one of the like emotions that I can notice, that kind of helps me like ground and, okay, I'm seeking to support what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
versus I'm seeking to really be curious about what the other person is thinking or what their journey is. Because if I'm feeling frustrated, that might mean that I'm feeling impatient, because let's just get to what I think. Or
Yeah.
um my point of view is being threatened, or something down that line. You start to feel a little anxious or frustrated, or you start to feel yourself getting something worked
Yeah.
up. That's a really good sign that you're not in objective curiosity mode. So, not that you always have to be, but if really you're trying to figure out, am I seeking to support my opinion, or am I
Yeah.
seeking to explore what else could be true? Um, and I like to call you and I've talked about this a little bit. This game of what else could be true. I like to call it a game. Like, let's play this game of what else could be true, because, like, I'm just sort of using semantics on myself, but a game doesn't feel threatening, right? Like, let's
Right.
just suspend reality for a moment and play a game. What else could be true? And then you start to go, oh, wait a second. Maybe these other things could be true. I guess you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, maybe I am right, but also maybe these other things could be true.
Yeah. And I do think, like, you and I have had these types of conversations in the past, where it's like we allow our brains, whether it's like, that scenario planning perspective of it, like, it's also can be true within our like belief system as well. Like, we
Yeah.
immediately become defensive because our beliefs are being challenged. And so if we're able to like hit pause on those and then move into that more curious mindset, play that what else could be true game, or what else could be another outcome of this type of thing, like that allows our brain to maybe move into spaces where we're a little more interested in having a conversation
Yeah.
versus just being like in defensive mode and like putting up walls and not really engaging.
And I think part of the reason this is so important is because when we just kind of follow along with what somebody else says, we give up a part of agency that we have. And it's like how you get into like brainwashing and you think about like cults and stuff and you think, how is that even possible? But like, it is because you just start to go, oh, yeah, well, this person said it and I believe this person. And
Right.
so, I'm on this person's side. They're in my group, and you'd stop questioning things from like that objective curiosity and you start just buying whatever they say. And then that gives somebody ultimate control over what you think. And that's an extreme example, but, it is
It's a
absolutely
very real one.
yeah, it is absolutely something that happens, and so, I think it's it's important to remember that we are the ones that have, agency of our agency.
And it's okay to change your mind. Like it is
Oh,
okay to have a belief or
that is
think a
so
certain
true.
way, get to a certain point and be like, "Ooh, I don't know if I believe that anymore," or "I don't know if I really trust that information as much as I once did."
If
Like,
you're not changing your mind, then you're probably not growing and learning, and, so you're probably just wrong about a lot of things,
right. But
and
I
you
think
just
we get
don't know it.
defensive. Right. I think we get defensive as a society because it's like, well, that's not what you said before, or
Yeah,
that's not how you used to articulate that. And it's like, okay, I'm aware, like I've changed my mind, or I've educated myself, or I have
yeah,
more information. Like,
yeah,
I think there is a level of sometimes we get afraid of maybe being judged or people looking at us in a certain way because we don't want to be seen as a flip-flopper. We don't want to be seen as like easily um I don't want to use the word manipulated because I don't think that's the right word either. But like, you just
yeah.
don't want to be seen as someone who just changes their mind and goes with whatever the popular trend is. So, like, it's okay to change your mind. It is okay to educate and inform yourself, and then your thoughts, feelings, and opinions begin to evolve and change as you become more aware.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking for this individual's name and I can't find it, but um there was somebody at Podfest who he like owns a comedy club in New York City and he was one of the leaders of the comedy track at Podfest this year. And he was on a panel talking about the right to cure. And everyone should have the right to cure. And that conversation really stuck with me um about I can't even remember the context of like what this oh, I think the context was like um when you're in business with somebody or having a relationship, a professional relationship with somebody, and something goes, south, what do you do? And I thought it was just a really sage perspective that he was bringing to the conversation in response to somebody's question about like giving people the right to cure because just because they were wrong um, it doesn't mean like you just shut them out. So,
Yeah.
um, I think about that often in the context of like we hear you know, people who were on one side of political things and now they're on another side, or one side of human rights advocacy and now they're on another side. And it's like, oh, well, but they were against us before. And so now everything they say is bad. And like, I'm not saying that we should just blindly trust people's motives.
Right.
But I, I really love the way that he said, everyone should have the right to cure because you're right. Like, if we're not changing our perspective based on new information, then we're not growing and learning. And I mean, how I would love to say that I'm never wrong about anything, but like, we're all wrong. you
Right.
know,
It's true.
at times, and um, probably more often than we'd love to admit.
Yeah, we're all on this journey like of life, and throughout it we're going through new experiences, having new things happen to us, and those things all inform our journey. And we may have very strong feelings one way until we are now knee deep in something, and now we're going to be changing our perspective because
Yeah.
now I'm living in it versus just like learning about it.
And I don't think that that means that we should become ambivalent and not have
No.
strongly held opinions about things. I think it's just about learning how to become aware of where our strongly held opinions are coming from and how to balance those and how to like pull ourselves out of that threatening mindset when
Yeah.
someone else believes differently. Um, but I do think there's a difference between like it's a boundaries. I think it comes back to a boundaries thing. It's like I continue to remember the words from the podcast I was listening to with Brene Brown as a guest, where she talked about like you don't always share your most vulnerable moments or have your most vulnerable conversations with everybody. You think about who are those people that you would really trust.
Yeah.
And like it's just about a level of like who are you really going to let into your inner circle, because if you're letting everyone in, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
um so be thoughtful about it, instead of just blindly walking around like vulnerable to everybody all the time.
Yeah.
um but but it's interesting.
Okay, so awareness, am I seeking to support my thoughts or am I actually being objectively curious about what's happening? I think another thing is really thinking critically about how we decide what true is in general. And I think that may be getting a little bit more difficult these days,
Yeah.
based on like who is the deciding factors in some of these like some sources I think that a lot of people used to go to and be like, oh, this is my source of truth. This is where I need to get my information. Now people may be like, oh, I don't know if that's really the place I should be going to. But I think like whenever we acknowledging that there is likely more than what is just being served up to you, I think is what I want people to be aware of is like whatever may be being put in front of you, whether it's through algorithms, whether it's through your preferred news stations, they know their audience. They know what
Yeah.
they are trying to get across. So seek more versus just taking something at face value.
Well, and this is so interesting because I think growing up there was this idea that like the fact that there could be multiple truths or like a gray area was sort of frowned upon. The way I grew up, and it was like there is always a right and a wrong. Everything is black and white, and to question that threatens what you believe. And so interesting. That was so interesting. Um, but I think sometimes you can get down to what the facts are, and sometimes like you can't. And it's not really about absolute truth. It's more about like aligning with values. And I'm not using that as a cop out for, well, we don't know what's true, so let's just give up. But more like when you're in those positions where you don't have every perspective or there's missing information, you do the best you can with what you have, but go back to your values and like let's
Yeah.
root in our actual values. And by values, I don't mean, political tenets. I mean like actual values. So things like I believe that everybody has value and should be treated with dignity and respect,
Yeah.
and I value that. So if I'm thinking about you know what is right and what is wrong, what's the right thing to do and what's the wrong thing to do, this is like I feel like I'm back in my ethics class from college. But it, if you tie it back to values, I think you'll find that you have less regrets about those decisions that you make where um there there wasn't a clear absolute truth because you know that you made a decision best based on the information you had at the time, based on the values that you strongly hold. And if you don't know what the values are that you strongly hold, you should spend some time thinking about that and getting clear on it. And I do think those evolve as we go through life, right?
Absolutely. I think it does. I think, again, as we go through life, w- we are served up new challenges and things that it's okay to have a perspective on, but that perspective may shift and change once you're actually walking through it. And so I think if you are holding too tight to certain things, like you're not, are you doing it based on principle? Or are you doing it based on like you don't want to have to be wrong, quote unquote?
Mm-hmm.
Um, or is it like I'm gonna go through this and I'm gonna figure out who I am as I go through this because this is a new challenge and this is forming me to have a different perspective,
Yeah.
based on whatever I'm going through. So I think that's really a good reminder.
I think as you're doing your fact checking, think about source diversity. So don't just go to one single place.
Yeah.
Go to multiple places to get sort of the facts. I do think that you can vet certain sources and say, okay, now these sources like are generally unbiased and or whatever the case may be. They're putting out valid information and not flashy headlines, those kinds of things. And I mean, you have to do that. We put those filters on all the time.
Yeah.
Even just in people that we talk to. We know sometimes the perspective of different individuals we know, and so we have to put a filter on the information for one thing or another.
Yeah, and that goes directly into the next one, which is like the depth of information versus just a headline consumption.
Yeah.
Like, is whatever is being served up to you just the headline to make it like give you what you can talk about around the water cooler, or is it like actually in-depth information that is, based on facts or the things that happened around
I mean,
something?
we all know this is real because you'll see like some crazy headline and then you'll go to the comments and there's all this just drama in the comments and then there are people saying, "Read the article. It's actually blah blah blah." And I
Right.
mean like anytime I see that going on, I just am like, "Okay, disengage. This is
Well,
just
I've also seen it a lot with like a lot of AI generated
yeah.
images that people have started putting out like
Yeah.
after the Oscars. There's this whole one about like Tom Hanks and his son and I was like, okay, I watched the Oscars. I don't remember seeing that. Like I did join a little late. Like did I miss an entire thing? And then I went into the comments and sure enough like people had put in there, this is not real. This is AI generated. Like it was all this stuff, but it looked so real.
That's crazy. I mean, we just really have to be aware that you cannot believe everything you see. And
Yeah.
I think it used to be that we could count on what we see with our eyes to be the version of truth. And
Right.
that's a little stressful to think about. So I'm not trying to stress anyone out, but just be a little more curious. And on the things that don't matter, like don't waste your energy
Right.
following that down the path.
Not
I think
everything deserves our energy.
yeah, not everything deserves our energy. Um, and then think about intent. So, is the intent to inform or to provoke? And if you're on social, the um, odds that the intent is to provoke in order to drive engagement are, higher than not. So, just be thoughtful of that.
Yeah.
And like, guys, we're not against social media. Um,
We use it. We
we
are active
do. We use
users.
it. I don't know if you would say we use it extremely well, but part of that is like this grappling with like what's gonna hook the algorithm and wanting to be true and authentic and not like
Right.
play for views. And it's like a tough balance.
It's true. It's very true. There's a framework that I read about, and it said, it, do I understand this or do I just agree with it? Meaning, like, am I truly understanding what I am reading and getting the different perspectives and understand like there's more than just what's being served up
Yeah.
versus am I just reading to agree with this? Like, am I just going to look and give the time, energy, and effort to things that, only reinforce my beliefs?
Yeah.
And I just thought that that was interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. And so it really made me like, I started to be more intentional about the things that I was stopping at and reading to see
Yeah.
like, okay, what about this is grabbing me, and why am I like clicking? If I have to like click into something, like why am I doing that additional click to learn more essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I just get hooked. It's like the curiosity comes, and then I'm like, I wasted too much time on this, and I don't feel better for it. So,
And then
um,
I think another one that you and I do really well together
yeah,
is what I recognize a strong argument from the other side.
yeah,
Um, and I think you and I do that really well with one another.
yeah, yeah,
And so therefore, like I feel like I have been able to take those skills that I have like learned with you and take that out into my life. And so it's kind of been fun to see how it's evolved as I've, moved beyond just here with those skills.
yeah. I think you should always have a safe place where you can play devil's advocate. And if you feel like you cannot go down the path of devil's advocate on something, then maybe that means that you're a little bit emotionally tied to a topic at the moment, and it might be better to put it down and come back later. If you're desiring to truly like explore and be curious, because sometimes you're just in this mindset where you can't. I mean, you're just kind of hooked, and so you got to set it down and come back later.
Yeah.
But like we do like we talk about this as healthy tension, and there's unhealthy tension. That's what we experience a lot of. But I think it's good to create a place for healthy tension
Yeah.
where you can like test thinking and have this push pull, and it's okay if you don't always land on agreement. Like disagree and commit is a real thing.
Yeah.
um you know it doesn't have to be threatening, and I think that's the trick that they don't talk about. That's the secret, that like disagreement doesn't have to be threatening.
Well, and just state it. Like, state what your intention is, so that way you're also not like people aren't assuming it. I think is another thing that sometimes we forget. Like, we can move into this place of trying to push someone's thinking or try to dig deeper for understanding, and it can sometimes be taken as, um, like we're attacking, or so the person moves more into a defensive mode, and it's like, no, 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 sorry, I'm just like seeking to understand, or I'm interested to
Yeah.
learn more, or whatever it may be. But I do think people can, it, it's always safe to like state your intent because then you can level set on what people are trying to walk away from the conversation with.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Um, so I think just some reminders for engaging in conversations. You don't have to choose between your beliefs and your relationships. Like like we talked about, you can disagree and commit. You can, just agree to disagree. You can respect somebody else, recognize that they have a different perspective, but it doesn't threaten yours. Now, like when people's strongly held beliefs invalidate your own humanity, I think that's probably not a healthy relationship to foster. So, thinking about what the topics are that you disagree and commit over. If you just disagree with my existence as a human, um, l- l- we don't need to disagree and commit. We just don't
Right.
need to interact.
Well, and then I think you have to figure out like what's right for you
Yeah,
in those circumstances. Like, is that relationship still valid? Do you put boundaries on that relationship? Like, what do you do?
yeah,
Because,
yeah.
like, it's a
You
real
do need
thing.
that is a boundaries issue for sure. And if you uh, um are curious about boundaries, we have a couple of episodes where we dive into our own learning experience and exploration around those. So I think while difficult, that was a good exercise for us to get through
Yeah.
because it certainly is something that I find I bring up a lot more often now. Thinking about oh, that's a boundaries issue. Um, but, you know, around other things that you may have beliefs around that aren't like violating somebody's human rights or
Right.
existence. You know, you don't have to choose between beliefs in your relationships. Um, Listening to understand versus listening to respond. So that level two listening instead of that level one listening. And level one listening is not bad. It is needed. It's a necessary skill. It's just when we choose to use it versus when we choose to kind of go up a level with a little more intention.
Yeah.
Um, Boundaries versus avoidance. And I love this one because we love to mask boundaries or politeness or will, will someone else even be able to handle the conversation? Um, as like we love to mask avoidance as those things. And I think sometimes not everything does have to be discussed or put out there, but sometimes our desire is to avoid and then we like push stuff down
Yeah.
and that stunts our ability to evolve and like seek the peace and happiness that we wish for. So I think being honest with ourselves about that is important.
Well, and with the other people that you're either avoiding or engaging in those conversations with, like relationships are built because you have conversations, you go through things, you
Yeah.
discuss them, it's a it's something that you're going through with someone and you reflect on it. And I don't know, like I think of all the things that you and I have been through and the conversations that we've had. Like
Yeah.
if we avoided the uncomfortable, uncommon in some situations conversations, like our I mean, I'm sure we'd still be friends, but we
I mean,
probably
there are
wouldn't have a
things I would ask you
podcast.
that I would not ask anybody else.
Right, that's knowing who you're safe with.
That's right. And I do think somebody described relationships to probably my therapist to me. So this is advice I paid for. So here you go. Here it is to you for free. They described relationships like a series of expanding circles. And they said, so the most inner circle, like that's going to be your like the people that you can have those like deeper sort of more challenging conversations with. Those are going to be the people that you're going to and you should be investing more time with. And then as you go out, those relationships can get more and more kind of surface level. You can still have the relationship, but they don't have to be like that person you get really vulnerable with, that
Right.
person that you spend a lot of your time with. And so if you take stock and you say, you know what, the people that I am spending most of my time with really like maybe should be in one of the farther out circles because we just don't align either in values or the things that we like to do. So we end up doing things together that are a drain for one of us or the other. Like
Yeah.
that might just be a mismatch. And it's not a bad thing. Like that's not judgment. It's just where you choose to spend your time.
Right.
Because as we're seeking to like we as humans are very like even if you're introverted, we're very relationship dependent.
Correct.
We're very
We're social
social
creatures.
beings. And if you don't have that good alignment and connection, um, like you can really feel lonely, which is actually
Yeah.
very bad for your health. Like it's bad for your
Correct.
physical health. And so, it was
Epidemic going on among adults right now.
yeah, it was a really interesting conversation that we had. And I thought, oh, okay, so instead of just like falling into relationships with people because I, come across them and then like going all in on those relationships, I can actually choose what the best fit is. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. And I hadn't really thought about that.
It's so true. And I do think like when you understand uh those differentiators, and I think we all grow up with like an understanding of what we think those should be, but
Yeah.
as we get older, those may actually shift out of the things that we think or is instilled within us
Yeah.
as the things are the people that should be in those, things may shift and change a little bit, and that's okay. Don't be tough on yourself. Like it is okay that those like people shift around into those different atmospheres.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've harkened back to just a couple of different things that we've previously talked about. So we've talked about like
Hearken.
difficult,
Hark, hark.
we've talked about difficult conversations, a couple of episodes. So if you if we said anything there that piqued your interest, definitely go check those out. And then also curiosity as a tool for connection. There is a lot of data and statistics coming out right now that the current environment that we are living in, there is an epidemic of loneliness going on amongst adults. And I think a lot of it is because
Yeah.
we feel like we can only be around people who think and believe exactly like us. And let's face it, there's not a lot of people who think and believe exactly the way that we think and
I mean,
believe.
thank goodness there are not just a bunch of gens running around in this world, because
Here, here.
that might be a little much. I don't know.
Be three much for sure.
Should the world be so lucky?
Should they be? But I think as like I thought more about all of the way that I'm engaging, the things that I'm learning, I kind of came I've started like this little like thing to be more aware
I
of
love
how I'm
this.
doing this. So
I love
the first
this.
one is before I share anything on social media, I really take a pause and I really look to see if I truly understand what it's about, and am I putting it out there to be to cause like a reaction, or am I causing it to inform, educate? Like, what am I doing for it? Because I
Yeah.
think sometimes when we just act out of impulse, like we may inadvertently be sharing either wrong or incorrect or only, partially correct information. And then we may be upsetting people. Like we may be inadvertently, you know, adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah. Now, like, look, some fires need to have fuel thrown on them.
Agreed.
Advocacy is important, and I think you see that we jump in on that. And so sometimes you just open up the gasoline can and pour it on because
It's necessary.
it's necessary. But be intentional when you're doing that instead of unintentional, and then you
Right.
go, whoops, I didn't mean to light that fire.
Exactly. Well, because even then, whenever you start to respond out of places of intention versus emotional reaction,
Yeah.
you it's engaging a different part of a conversation. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's like hard about some of this stuff. And with advocacy, it's like it's hard not to get the emotion stirred up, because it's advocacy. You're obviously passionate about it, so it's
Yeah, but
pushing you
sometimes
into a
you need
place.
the emotion in order to like get the attention or the point, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
Oh, I'm
It's
not saying that that's a
y-
bad thing.
yeah, it's just being intentional about it. And so I love that you're saying like this isn't just about what everybody else is putting out on social. This is also about how I myself am engaging in social. And
Right.
so I'm asking myself to pause and just ask the question, do I actually understand this? Or
Yep.
am I just hitting share because I got this emotional response and I was like, yay, support the trans, and then
Right.
just share and not actually look and see like what like vet the information. And I
Exactly.
do think that there was like some of that was going on, that there are some like leaders in like social activism specifically for the trans community who were kind of like pulling back a little bit of the, hey, there's a lot of noise going on about this. Let me tell you what's true and what's not true. This is
Yeah.
what's true and this is what's not true. Because it was like all of this energy was going, which is great, but going towards sort of the wrong things,
Right.
and it wasn't helping.
And that can be
Um,
pulled into, it can easily drift. I think I
yeah.
love that word drift. Like I do think it can happen, especially when people are super passionate and you get into the specifics. And like with any argument, whenever you get into the specifics, you get into the gray areas. Like it just, we don't,
Yeah.
it's hard to operate in the specifics of everything, because you, planning for it all is almost impossible.
And I think that's where you go back to like am I sharing it? Have I found the trusted sources that I've vetted to provide information on legislation that's happening, on,
Right.
all of these things? Because you can't, like, there's just so much happening. You can't literally sit and vet every single piece of information at all times, but we should be like vetting what we're saying. And sometimes I think that's in thinking about the source that you're getting information from, and just being like, you can vet the source, and then it's a little easier to vet
Right.
the information that comes through.
Yeah. Another thing that I do is I look for at least one source that challenges me. And to be very clear, I'm looking for something that will challenge me without like making me feel
Enraging you.
right. Exactly. Like I'm trying to inform myself and not enrage
Yeah.
myself.
I had a situation sort of like this, where there was somebody that I've known for a long time, that was on social, and they would question a lot of things, and I thought, "Oh, okay, well, this is healthy to kind of see where the perspective went." But then it became a horrible, hateful attack, and that was when I was like, "Okay, so I've just been too naive about this all along." Didn't realize I had left myself open to being attacked. Um, so gotta shut that off. So um, I think that's a really important, like, distinction that you make.
Yeah.
People that challenge you, but that are gonna do so with aligned values. When beliefs don't align, if values do, like, it's still a safe space.
But
And when
even if it's something that like you don't necessarily agree with, I'm not gonna say values based because I think
when I say values, I mean, like, I believe in coming from a place of kindness. I believe that everyone has a right to dignity and being treated respectfully. And if you don't believe that, then we are misaligned on values. And so if we disagree on beliefs, we're never going to be able to have a safe conversation about that. So that's what I mean by values versus, I'm not talking about issues. I'm talking about, like, really values.
okay, I see. Because I was gonna say like an example I was gonna use is there are some politicians who I think articulate kind of the same messages, but they go about it very differently.
Mm,
And some of them, I think, do it to stoke and to provoke. And others, I think they do it in such a way to educate and inform.
mhm.
And the way that they go, I am not saying that either direction is right or wrong. But I think when you are looking for information on the other side, like trying to better understand the other side of an argument, maybe go the route of looking for the one to inform and educate
Yeah.
versus the one looking to provoke and enrage.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just because we don't need to walk around triggered all the time. Like, that actually does create this syndrome where, like, your adrenal glands are just in hyperactive mode,
Yeah.
and you just live in this constant state of adrenaline,
Uh-huh.
which we are not meant to do. So you are, like, more stressed, more tired. It takes a physical toll on your
Yeah.
body. And I think more people walk around like that because they're just getting these little micro pings of adrenaline all of the time, based on, like, getting enraged by the things that we see throughout the
Yep.
day. And then there are times where I'm like, okay, let me just turn this off because I need to stop scrolling. And I literally flip the app up and off. And all of a sudden, without even thinking about it, I'm like, why is this app open again? I flipped it up, and then I went back and I opened the app again.
Yeah.
Like, why is it open again? Why?
Well, that leads me to my final two here: awareness of what my body is telling me. If you are experiencing tightness, like a clenched jaw, or you're feeling
Okay.
like your shoulders up at your like,
100% of the
that may
time.
means that you need to press pause or take a break or slow down a little bit.
It's so
Which
true.
leads me to the fourth, which is take a break. Being informed doesn't mean that you have to be constantly plugged in and know every update the moment that it comes out. Like, that's a lot. And it can be very, very overwhelming.
And think about the people that you know and love who are advocates and who are a big voice constantly advocating for the rights of others. And think about what you can do to help bring a little more positive balance back to them proactively. There are a couple of people that I know who are like constantly out there fighting the fight. And I try to I'm less good at this now that I'm back in a have a lot going on back at work mode, but I try to be like mindful of, sending those messages and doing those things to help be that counterbalance because I know it can be exhausting. And if the generals are depleted, the war is lost.
Yeah, it's true.
So, um, I love this. Thank you for sharing this. I think those are some really great things to be more aware of and part of how we become the reality we want to live.
That's right. That's right.
So, in closing, awareness of what you consume, how you react, and who you want to be in the middle of it all is really, really important. And you don't have to know everything, despite what you get your kids to believe. But you do get to choose how you show up. And so just, don't give your agency of your own thoughts, feelings, opinions, your emotional journey, your adrenaline over to someone else for the monetization of the algorithms.
I just love this idea of the agency of self that you brought up. We don't have that anywhere written where we were going to talk about that, but it's so true. Like it's come to be like the line that or the red thread that's pulled through the entire episode. So thanks for that, Jen.
Of course. Little neuro nugget there for you. Well, we would love for you to share with us your thoughts about this. And also, we are here to like crowdsource some tips. How do you manage all of this? Because we're not showing up talking about it because we're excellent at it. We're showing up
Ain't that the
talking about it
truth?
because it impacts our own journey to health, wellness, happiness, peace.
Yeah. So let us know. We'd love to hear from you depending on what platform you're listening on. You can drop a note in the comments. You can reach out to us via email at connect@chrisandjenitm.com, or you can text us at 940-278-8129.
Yes, don't forget to follow on social, hit like and subscribe. It really does help us. We don't get paid to do this. We actually pay money to produce this. So we would just really appreciate anything that you can do to help continue to have us show up so that more people can join in.
Yep.
And until next time, be kind to yourself, to one another, and make it a great week.
Bye, everyone.